ladies and gentlemen. My opportunity here today is to perhaps present you with a different perspective. And I'm going to do so by, I know I'm standing here at the United Nations, and this is a world view. But I'm going to try to take this down to a very, very small view. In fact, I'm going to try to focus my comments on those of you in the room today. Because the fact that you're sitting here in this room, in this city, from my perspective and the work that I have done, means that you're at risk. One of the things that I do in my daily work as the Deputy Secretary was I listen to threat briefings. I'm the Homeland Security Advisor for the Governor of New York. I'm on the Homeland Security Advisory Council for the Secretary of Homeland Security for the United States. And I work with all of the other intelligence agencies at the federal and local level to determine what puts us at risk. And when I listen to the discussion here and I look through the materials and I see the title, it's always a little stunning to me that we as civilized individuals talk about an issue this crucial in kind of an academic tone. Now that's essential because it's so complicated. And you need to develop the strategies without emotion. But for me, there is always emotion. I lost lots of friends in the World Trade Center. I went to 26 funerals out in Long Island. To this day, as I walk through the streets of my neighborhood, I always meet somebody who lost a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a husband, or a wife. So for me, this is intensely personal, and it has shaped my entire view. So allow me, if I can, just to give you the other side, the other perspective, because it will have relevance to you. Now, when I say you're at risk, this is what I mean. You are in a city of 8 million people that has one source of water. It is the reservoir system up in New York State. It's about 60, 70 miles to 100 miles north of us. It is the single largest point of failure in the delivery of water to this city. And now you sit and say to yourself, well, all right, so let's say that that happened. And God forbid the water supply was cut off. Well, you certainly bring in more water. Stop and think about that. Could you bring in water to 8 million people in this concentration? Absolutely not. There is no system in the world that could accomplish that. We say, well, we could all leave. We could just get up and go. We could go someplace else where there is water. Really? How long do you think that would take? Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Long Island are all islands. If you saw the pictures of recently getting out of Houston with the hurricanes, and you saw all the traffic backed up for miles and miles, I would venture to say it would be worse here. Much worse here. And you say, well, what about Long Island? And perhaps you know your geography and your geology. And you know Long Island sits over the largest aquifer, sole source aquifer, in the northeast and on the eastern seaboard, the Lloyd Aquifer. Here's the problem. The Lloyd Aquifer does not connect with the city of New York. There are pipes in Queens and in Nassau County that are right next to each other. And one is for Long Island, one is for New York City, and never the twain shall meet. That's lunacy. One of the things I've been trying to work on. But it brings to bear probably one of the missing key components of water. That is ownership. Water is an intensely emotional debate because it is the thing that we use to live every day. But it's also a question of purity. And when you get into the question of purity and you talk about security, there's very little flexibility. Now, before I go on, I have to tell you that the woman who just spoke here, Terry Bischoff, is one of the people out there who has kind of a tough job, because she walks around and she considers all these issues. But she's the person out in the wilderness saying, you know, I don't want to be the party pooper here, but you gotta be prepared, because things do happen. And before I got this job, I perhaps would have said, you know, Terry, maybe you are a little bit of a downer. You bring this perspective that we always need to be doing different things. Then, of course, 9/11 happens. And, of course, I saw the steam blast that happened last summer, right outside of Grand Central. I saw the crane collapse with body bags on the street. I've seen things happen that I never thought would happen before. So yeah, there really is a need for people like Terry Bischoff to continue saying the Red Cross matters, giving blood matters, getting trained as a volunteer matters. But back to water. If you take a look at a society's priorities, you will be able to discern them, not by talking to people, but rather seeing what they're willing to spend money on. And money, as we know, is the enabler. Yet when we look at how we spend money for Homeland Security in the United States and in New York State, you'll utilize a risk formula. Very simple. Risk equals threat times vulnerability times consequence. So now if you take water, right? Well, let's do a risk analysis for water. Vulnerability. We have water systems here in the state and in the city of New York that are literally over 100 years old. We have the reservoir system, which is, again, a single point of failure. So the vulnerability, I would argue, is pretty significant. Consequence? I've already laid that out for you. Sitting here trying to evacuate this city would be very, very difficult. There's absolutely no way you could bring in enough water to sustain people. And then the other element of that is that water is only second to air in terms of the timetable of consequence. And within 3 to 4 days, infants and the elderly and infirm would see devastating consequences. So to move to, you got consequence, you have vulnerability, and now threat. That's the problem. As much as there are, I think, 17 or 18 examples in the handout of attacks on water systems from 1907 to 2006, in the threat streams, and I hold several security clearances, in the threat stream information that you see, you never see an attack or a plan being trained or being utilized against a water system. Recently, it has always been transit. Whether Mumbai, whether London, whether Madrid, it has always been transit. But I would argue that that is something that could change in an instant. But nonetheless, the fact that there is really no threat information against water systems currently means that the risk score for water facilities is relatively low as compared to, say, transit.